have with us, as Frank said, the Hungarian ambassador to the United States. And she's been ambassador here since 2015. In fact, tomorrow, I believe, is the second anniversary of when she presented her credentials to then President President Obama. She's worked extensively with the Office of the Prime Minister of Hungary. She's covered transatlantic issues with emphasis on energy security and cybersecurity. She's been head of the International Public Affairs and chief advisor on international relations to the chairman of the board of the Hungarian oil and gas company MOL Group. Dr. Szemerkényi also held other previous government posts, including State Secretary for Foreign Policy and National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister. She was also Senior Advisor to the State Secretary of Ministry of Defense of Hungary. She's completed academic research. She's been a regular speaker at high-level international conferences. She's been a university lecturer at the Caroli University in Budapest and at Catholic University of Milan, Italy. She's the author of several publications in international relations, security policy, and energy security. She worked as a research associate at the International Institute for Strategic Studies in London, where she wrote a Delphi paper number 36, which was entitled Central European Civil Military Reforms at Risk. This was published by Oxford University Press and in 1996. She was also elected president of the NGO Hungarian New Atlantic Initiative between 2003 and 2012, and she now serves as elected vice president of the Hungarian Atlantic Council. She completed her master's degree in strategic studies as a Fulbright fellow at the School of Advanced International Studies here in DC at Johns Hopkins University. And she earned her doctoral degree at Catholic University of Budapest in 2006 with a PhD thesis entitled Energy Security, West European and Warsaw Pact Energy Strategies between 1945 and 1990. Dr. Szemerkényi was also awarded the Slovak Atlantic Commission's Award in appreciation for promoting freedom and security in Central Europe, and the Bene Merito honor by Sikorski, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Poland. She was honored with the National du Mérite Commandour by President Jacques Chirac, the president of France. In Hungary, she was decorated with the National Service Award for the contribution to Hungary's joining NATO by the Minister of Defense of Hungary. It's all a mouthful. But probably her most rewarding job, if I can say that, is as mom of 4. So, of course, it is our pleasure to introduce the Hungarian Ambassador to the United States, Dr. Réka Szemerkényi.
Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation and wonderful welcome. I would like to thank you very much for this fantastic initiative and congratulate Professor Ferrara, because when I first heard of it, I thought, my goodness, this is exactly what is really so attractive for us and that is so hopefully useful for the university students and faculty, because I think that's what I appreciated in my education in the United States, to have academia and the theory and the principles and the practice. So I'm now the practice. And I would like to thank very much Dean Barbara Howard for this very, very kind invitation and presentation. I think it's a wonderful opportunity for me here, and I would like to congratulate you especially for saying a most difficult Hungarian name perfectly. I think that's the biggest challenge, you know. And I would like to thank you all for coming, because I really appreciate your interest, your time and attention to a part of the European continent which is really in the midst of a lot of changes. So it is really very timely for us to speak about Hungary and speak about the Central European region, and I very much appreciate this opportunity. The reason I wanted to start my short presentation is first to locate where the problems are, or where the developments are in Europe. because what we have seen over the past few years is really a massive new security challenge coming on Europe. And as you have seen, I started my career in 1990 when we had in Hungary the first free elections. Before that, under communism, the elections were there, but you had only one choice to vote for. So that was sort of very clear, no difficulties. You couldn't miss it. But the 1990 and the first free elections, I had been in the previous year or so participating in many of the demonstrations for wanting to have free elections in Hungary. So for us, that was the end of an era and a beginning of a new era in which we were regaining our sovereignty and independence from the Soviet Union, from the oppressive sort of socialist and communist system. And I thought it was really a momentous period in Hungarian history, but also in my personal history. So that's when I decided that finally, with a free Hungary, I don't have to join the Communist Party if I want to do diplomacy and international relations. That was my time, and that's when I started to work in the Ministry of Defense. At that time, it was all populated with the not only military, but Soviet-trained military guys, because that was, a very important security tool for the Soviet regime to control the oppressed countries. So I was among the first 5 or 10 civilians who walked into the Ministry of Defense and wanted to reestablish the sovereignty based on the sovereign security and defense policy of Hungary. So what is this country that we're talking about? I think, this is a good map because this shows to you the entire European Union. And what you can see is this part, this is Hungary, which is really the borderland of the European Union. But what is interesting is, and this map, hopefully very visible, is that we have a strong regional cooperation. Poland, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary are countries that had been free before World War II and were regaining their sovereignty and independence, of course, after the end of the Cold War. And of course, this links us a lot with the Baltics, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, but very much closer because it is in these countries where some parts of sovereignty remained during the Cold War era. So we were supposedly, independent countries from the Soviet Union, whereas the Baltics had to be were incorporated in the Soviet Union. But this is where sort of the end of the Cold War started as well. Hungary was the first country to revolt against the Soviet Union in 1956. A lot of young Hungarian kids died, and they were fighting for freedom. It was a victorious 2 weeks period when, against all odds, mighty superpower, a small nation stands up and says we want freedom and democracy, which is really powerful. Many of the revolutionaries were young kids, 15, 16, 18. Those who were captured, they were put into prison, tortured by the Soviet system afterwards. And some of them who were underage, as I just said among the professors before the lecture, some of them were kept in prison until they reached the age of 18 when they were executed. So I think we could see the oppressive system, the power of this system. It was 1956. Poland has its revolution in the Czechoslovakia, which was together one country, had their revolution in 1968. That was also oppressed, and then Poland had their freedom fight in 1980. But all together, sort of, giving inspiration from one country to another, our generation of, freedom fighters, believers in democratic values and independence, led to the fall of the Iron Curtain, which had been roughly here in the middle of Germany. And then, of course, Poland, the Czechoslovak country at the time, and Hungary were sort of regaining their freedom in 1990. What is interesting is also that Hungary, situated in the middle of this, is surrounded by Slavic countries on the east, so Poland, both the Czech Republic and Slovakia, as well as Belarus, in the Soviet Union, or the southern Slav countries, Slovenia, Croatia, Serbia, Bulgaria, are all having Slavic roots. So that's really a kind of a Slavic ocean or Slavic sort of series of countries on the east. On the west, we have Germany, Austria, Switzerland, countries of Germanic origin, and the culture is again very different. Hungary, in between, is neither Slavic nor Germanic. We have a tradition of, scientific proof, but it's difficult to believe it in. So, I mean, no, you only can believe it because you don't sense that any other way. But that the Hungarian language has common roots with the Finnish one, and so we have this Finno-Ugric language family. And we have a joke that says that these peoples were coming, Hungarians and Finnish, were coming from the east towards the west, and at a certain stage there was an inscription saying, you know, the good lands are here, and those who could read went south to Hungary, those who couldn't ended up in Finland, and the Finnish have it the other way around. So that's sort of our big common ancestry. But what I really thought of starting is, you know, to show a little bit of the background and to emphasize how many things we have been able to bring to our common culture. And I thought of showing to you one of the Hungarian inventions, because we, as among these Slavic countries and among the Germanic countries, having our unique culture, unique history, very unique language that is really difficult to pronounce. So Barbara was doing a great job, because one of the most difficult things in Hungarian is my name, I think. So once you get past this, there's not much more difficult than you can expect. But this is Budapest. This is the chain bridge, the first stone bridge that was built on the European continent. And the first one ever before was built in the United Kingdom. So we have traditionally been very much focusing on innovation, on inventing new things, on bringing over innovations into Hungary and launching new things. So we have this strong tradition that we believe in that is typically Hungarian. So one of the innovations that we have most recently added is the presentation type called Prezi. That was developed by Hungarians. This is the way Prezi works. It says cool. So I have to do my presentations with the Prezi system. It's not just slideshows. We have this Hungarian statistics that we really focus on inventions per capita, and in the country there's a lot of very strong education of mathematics and technical sciences. But we made a collection of some of the inventions that have Hungarians in the background, and you must have seen those inventions. Probably don't know that it was invented by Hungarians. So here's my time to show to you that we're all behind all these big good things. Soda water, which is sparkling water made in a bottle that you can produce out of every regular water, was invented by a Hungarian guy called Ányos Jedlik, and that's the machine that he invented. He also invented the electric engine and the unipolar inductor in 1856. Carburetor was also invented, which is used in machines, in a lot of the engines. Was also invented by two Hungarians, Banki and Tonka. You know this car, the Ford model? That was invented by a Hungarian guy working for Ford. So I think this guy, these two, Joseph Galamb and Jenő Farkas, were working for Ford Motor Company, and they invented the T model. Modestly, we also would like to tell you that vitamin C was invented by a Hungarian, and you can eat all the vitamin C's in the world. It was invented by this Hungarian wonderful doctor professor, Albert Szent-Györgyi, who was a fantastic inventor and a historic personality in the Hungarian health system. Automatic gear shift and the ballpoint pen. You use it every day, believe it or not. I will tell you the secret, invented by a Hungarian. His name was László Bíró, and in some countries they even call the pen Bíró. The reason is the inventor of this type of a pen, a Hungarian, but also the automatic gear shift was invented by the same guy. So he's another good Hungarian. János Neumann is a very famous Hungarian, end of World War II. He was one of the 3 people in the world who invented the computers. He was specializing on quantum mechanics and the game theory, so he was among the first the strongest contributors and inventors of the computer system. Holography was invented by a Hungarian. His name is Gábor Dénes in 1946. You have seen Rubik's Cube? A Hungarian invention. Rubik is the family name of the guy, so he's Ernő Rubik, and he invented the thing, among other mathematical things as well. Word and Excel were developed by a guy called Charles Simony. He lives in the United States, but he's of Hungarian origin, speaks perfect Hungarian, and is a very nice guy. He invented these stuff. IGO, the navigation system, was also invented by these two Hungarian guys. Prezi, of course, the one that I'm using now. This new type of presentation that can be used for giving a background for speeches were all invented by Hungarians. So I think this gives you a good feel of how many people we have. Among the inventors or the developers of the nuclear bomb, 4 of the 5 scientists who were working on this were Hungarians. So there is a story that says that when they were working on the nuclear bomb and on atomic reaction and how this can be worked, if this one guy who was not Hungarian went to the restroom, the others could speak Hungarian in the United States when they were developing the atomic reactor. So, but there were many Hungarians in Hollywood. At the beginning of the Hollywood movie making, it was really by Hungarians who launched the film production. Paramount Studios was launched by a Hungarian called Adolf Cukor. The 20th Century Fox was Vilmos Fried, a Hungarian guy. Universal Pictures was launched by Jakab Pasternak, who was also a Hungarian. Big directors or famous names of the beginning of the movie making, Sándor Korda, Mihály Kertész, were all Hungarians who contributed to American filmmaking. So very modestly, let me call your attention to the Hungarian roots of some of the big actors and big names in the Hollywood filmmaking. Dracula, the first movie, was played by a Hungarian guy, Béla Lugosi. Johnny Weissmuller, a Hungarian. Tarzan. You may not have seen it because it's my generation, but anyways, he is a Hungarian guy. Tony Curtis, who has made several movies, he was also a Hungarian guy who spoke good Hungarian. Paul Newman, Hungarian origin. Peter Falk, Hungarian origin. William Shatner, Captain, you see this one, it's important, Captain Kirk in Star Trek. Goldie Hawn, Kate Hudson, Hungarian origin. Jerry Seinfeld, Drew Barrymore, Rachel Weisz, Adrian Brody. The Simpsons were invented by Hungarians. So let me tell you all this. We're there. So this is a very important part because what you can see is this guy, Gábor Csupó, he animated The Simpsons. So this is him who started the whole thing and worked from the beginning on The Simpsons. And in 2000, they had a part of The Simpsons when they were predicting Trump's victory as Donald Trump becoming president of the United States. And in this movie, in this part of The Simpsons, they had a part when Donald Trump was in the this staircase, going down on Trump Tower, helloing everyone as a new president of the United States, which is what exactly happened in 2015. Modestly done by Hungarians. So I think it's kind of, and then you can see the electoral results, which was written as part of The Simpsons in 2000, so 15 years in advance. That just shows, I think, in some ways, why Hungarians consider themselves a nation of innovators and a country where a lot of the thinking and mind work goes into finding out new things. Part of this new things is our economic story and the success of the past few years. Back in 2010, Hungary was in such a difficult economic shape. It was after the 2008 crisis that was predicted to be collapsing like the Greek economy has since then. So it was said by most of the economic advisory and analyst institutions in London and the United States that the Hungarian economy was going to collapse. Of course, it needed a lot of fundamental changes in the economy, but the end result of these 7 years of economic changes, what we can see now is a great success story, and that brings us to the present, and that's why I think it's important for you to have this background. Even Greece was considered to be in a better condition than the Hungarian economy was in 2009 and 10. We had to introduce a number of unconventional economic and structural steps to get out of this economic difficulty. We decreased personal income tax, we increased the VAT tax, we had sectoral taxation introduced, but the focus was on job creation and reducing unemployment and increasing the employment and reducing the external indebtedness level of the country. And as a result of these decisions, what we have managed to see is a situation in which we have managed to put the budget deficit under the 3% level for 3 years in a row. One of the few countries in Europe that managed to decrease the budget deficit in a very significant way. We're now having a 3.4% economic growth predicted for this year, one of the best ones in the European continent, where, you know, if you have an economic growth of about 1%, then everybody is really seems to be happy with that. And the increasing of the employment ratio is also very important, because we managed to decrease it from about 16 to 17% to 4.9. So it's a very significant improvement in the economy, and that is called the Hungarian model. And I think, you know, we have a very important element of this, is that we linked the Hungarian economic policy efforts with the Hungarian foreign policy and cultural diplomacy effort, and we were trying to present the investment and business opportunities in this very sort of complex and comprehensive way of attracting investors into Hungary. But we have also improved the regulatory system, and the regulatory framework has been modernized and very much focused on a new labor code. There is a strongly reduced administrative burden to starting new businesses, and it's a very much, you know, business-oriented governmental work that you could see over the past 7-8 years, as a result of which we very much believe that the figures that we're having and the numbers show that this is a very competitive economy and a very investor-friendly environment that you can have now. We call this the Hungarian model, or many in the business analyst centers call this the Hungarian model. But the lady there is because she is a Hungarian model, who was presented on the Elle, the French fashion magazine. But I think it's a very important, we try to enumerate the most important element of this Hungarian model: a cost-effective labor force and a very highly qualified labor force in which you can have really highly qualified people on all levels that you need in a business. Strong cooperation between industry and academia. We have a very good geographical position. As you can remember, we're really in the center of Europe, so it's easy for any businesses to, from a logistical point of view, to reach you know, several countries and most of the European Union from Hungary. So it's a good location as well. But we have a good communication infrastructure. One of the best internet accesses in the Central East European part is provided in Hungary, and we have a strong focus on increasing that in the future as well. So we have a lot of these elements. And of course, to boost foreign direct investments, we had a very strong and massive governmental policy to focus on that development. We developed tax allowance structures, focused on job creation. Social tax allowance was introduced, and a training subsidy, so that the businesses can have those sort of expertise which is needed for their own investment priorities, provided for them by the government as well, through a strong government, academia, and business cooperation. And I think this really creates a good and strong business force in Hungary. Yeah, I mean, labor force in Hungary for the businesses. And the results. We have 2015, a record year for exports. Increase was 104%, which is very strong. The foreign direct investment per person was increased significantly also, and of course the industry's contribution to the GDP was significantly increased to 27.5%, which is a fundamentally important element of this economic success. So we have a very good success story. We have some good tendencies that continue since then as well. We continue to have a good export growth, import growth, and a trade surplus is characterizing the economy as well. And of course, the most important thing from our point of view is Hungarian American businesses. What is very important for me is that the United States exports into Hungary is really showing that the US companies are taking the number 2 place in Hungarian exports after the European Union countries. Of course, European Union is a different framework, but outside the European Union, the biggest exporter into Hungary is the United States. What is also very interesting is that the biggest export target market of the Hungarian economies are also the US companies. So we have the Hungarian companies after the European Union target the American market on the second level. So I think that's really showing a very important cooperation in the business sector between the two countries. And we have established so-called strategic partnerships with some of the key American companies. 40 out of the 50 biggest, largest American companies are investing in Hungary. And the strategic partnership means that, for instance, if Oracle needs to set up a new center somewhere in Hungary, and they request a better road for accessing their new facilities, then the government is happy to provide, extra infrastructure development in that region so that Oracle can have an investment there. So this kind of an economic strategic partnership has been very helpful and very important for the American companies as well. Of course, there's always room to grow, so we very much believe in focusing on this. And of course, we have an important belief that it is really good for all companies to invest in Hungary, and we have tried to underline and support this and make it clear and visible for the companies to focus on investment possibilities in Hungary. The Hungarian model, as I said, she is Hungarian. She was on Elle, this French magazine, but the Hungarian business model is this one. We have the global best to invest list, in which in 2015 Hungary was number 1 on the list. And of course, we have a number of future plans which hopefully will attract further investment in Hungary. So we have a strong plan of increasing the digitalization of the economy and of the country. So we are putting a lot of support for digital knowledge in the country and the increase of the share of the digital economy. Another important element of future development is to shift to the it's called the Ányos Jedlik program. You have seen that he was one of the investors that I showed you at the beginning. He is the program is named after him, to shift to electric cars and to develop the largest electric car system in Europe, the first to start with. And we believe it's really something that helps for not just the green economy, but also for in many other sectors in the future as well. And of course, we have a very important IRINI plan, who's also one of the investors that I showed you at the beginning. This plan is focusing on industrial development programs in various sectors in the economy. And of course, we have some other measures that we hope we're introducing and that we hope will continue to attract investment into Hungary. Some of the figures, of course, are most important for investors. So much about the economic success story of Hungary. And I think this is what brings us to the most difficult part of the current situation in Europe, which is the migration problem. And I thought that this is, can you enlarge it for me, please? Because as you can see from the developments of the past 2 years, Hungary and Europe is under very significant strategic and security pressure that has been in the focus on many of the international media coverage as well. So we have seen that one of the major routes of this migration flow that was arriving into Europe, since the beginning of 2015. It was really January 2015 when it all started. There were 2 major routes of these migration waves arriving into Europe. One was the sea route, and a lot of the North African countries were missing horrible little boats with horrible accidents following. Of course, it was really heartbreaking, arriving into Italy. And from Italy going up, the target country was Germany and Austria. The other route, so that was one of the main routes of the migration wave that was coming into the European Union. The other migration route was on the so-called the land route, because people could, of course, seeing the difficulties and the insecurity and the challenges on the sea route, people could actually just walk into the European Union, and that was called the land route. So a lot of the African, North African countries, primarily starting with the Syrian war, were emitting massive numbers of people arriving, sometimes tens of thousands per day, to the Hungarian border. Were coming through the land route through Turkey, Greece. From Greece to the Balkan Peninsula, to Macedonia, Serbia, and from Serbia into Hungary. That was sort of the other big sort of land route. So out of the 1.5 million people that arrived into Europe in the first, since the beginning of January 2015, Hungary was receiving 400,000 people arriving into the European Union. The problem was that none of these countries, Italy definitely, neither Greece, which is a European Union country, were taking the vetting or the registration of the migrants seriously into consideration. Obviously, the numbers are really pressing, so it was very difficult. But still, we have a common border in the European Union, which means that you can actually travel from Poland to Portugal, from Hungary to Ireland, without a passport, because we consider this as one common zone, which is very good on the individual level, obviously, but it's hugely important on the businesses level, because it means that you have to. You can have your trucks and all the goods going from one country to another without stopping at every border for several hours for the passport checking. So this common economic zone is very important for us. We have common registration rules, and we are signatories of this agreement, which we call the Schengen and the Dublin agreements inside the European Union, which tells how to do the registration of people who are not European Union citizens. But what we saw was that nobody was doing this registration. But when it turned out that the massiveness of this influx of people is very serious, we were the first country to say, we want to keep the passport-free travel zone in the European Union, so we have to take the registration seriously. We have to do that. So that's when we had to put up a fence, because there was no way between Hungary and Serbia. What you can't see here is that there is a big, massive agricultural land. It's totally flat. It's totally open. There are legal border crossings, which were the only ones that people used, but you could easily walk anywhere. And of course, with these massive waves of people coming in to the European Union, they were walking anywhere. And that was impossible to register those people. Practically 90% did not have passports. So we had a problem there. And of course, the question was whether Hungary is able to register these people, or whether Hungary, if it's not able to register these people, Hungary will be excluded from this common passportless travel zone, because that is the consequence of not living up to the international commitment that you had. So when we were doing this registration, we put up the fence and people could only come through the illegal border crossings. Then we managed to gather some important information about the real processes on the ground. And it turned out most of the people, almost everyone, were saying they were coming from Syria. But when we had interpreters at the legal border crossings, it turned out that many were speaking Pashtun, others were speaking Urdu. They were coming from Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh. Many were coming from the sub-Saharan Africa. So although about 30% overall, since the beginning of this migration wave, are coming from Syria, 70% are not. So the phenomenon is a lot more complex phenomenon. We can't just tackle it as a Syrian refugee crisis. It is a lot more difficult. It requires a lot more nuanced approach. We have to understand a lot better what is the motivation so that we can develop the right policies for this. So another important element was, of course, that we had in the media, you could see a lot of pictures of women and children coming in. In our statistics, 15% of the incoming and new entrants were women and children. 85% were young men between the ages of 18 and 35. Of course, after having gone through several weeks of walking towards the European Union, very frustrated, have gone through a lot of hardship. Of course, we believed they must have, their families back there. So in reality, what they would like to do is to have, find a place for their families and then bring the families over, which meant that, 85% of the people had another 2-3 people at least as their family members, waiting for the possibility to go after their family members. So that what we really are seeing is a very complex phenomenon, which we had in the end. We have now the statistics that the entrants into Hungary come from 104 countries in the world. And it is a horrible, very painful situation in Syria and in many countries in the Middle East. But fortunately, there is not war in 104 countries. So the phenomenon is a lot more complex, and it's a lot more attention that we have to give to the actual realities if we want to develop the right policies of how we can respond to the pressures and to the real situation than just follow the sort of CNN message of the developments. So I was giving a lot of presentations on this, but I always asked people at the audience if they are interested in understanding the reality behind the CNN pictures. And if they are not, then we're good, because the CNN will tell them one version of the reality. We have another statistics and figures that prove that the policies, if we follow the CNN message or this simplistic message of Syrian refugee crisis, then we're definitely going to develop wrong policies for the situation. So that is what we have experienced in Hungary and in the Central European region. And what we have seen as a result is that this sort of the German policies of saying, the more people will come, the more we will just receive in the European Union, and we'll distribute these people, and that will be the solution to it, is really another continuous pull factor for a lot of people who have difficulties. But obviously, after 2 years of this process, we're now having 2 million people. There is no way we can continue this over years and years. So we have to take it very seriously and have to sort of predict, what might be the problem, what is the real challenge, what should be the possibility or the solutions for the challenges. And what we have been trying to support is to raise real solutions and real suggestions, policy suggestions to the real situation, which is why what you could see is that I think at the end of last year, we had, I think, in Time magazine, the two leading personalities of shaping the European discourse on how to tackle the migration crisis were the German Chancellor Angela Merkel and the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán. So I think this is the dynamics that you have seen in the region. What we have in Europe, we have tried to promote our policies that really focus on solutions, on long-term solutions for these challenges. The most important thing is obviously to re-establish stability and security in many of these Middle East countries. We have now sent 200 troops to the fight against ISIL. Hungary is the largest per capita contributor of the Central East European countries in the fight against ISIL. So we have them in North Iraq. But at the same time, we propose that we have to increase the European Union budget that will support these people who have to run away from their countries so that they can have decent living, decent schools, decent homes, and decent jobs in their own countries. We have to increase our budgetary support. We have to create a kind of an international cooperation that will help these nations and these countries to reestablish their living conditions and their stability in their own countries. And we very much believe that this is the right path. What we have seen is many of these suggestions have been taken over by the European Union countries. They have followed the Hungarian suggestions. So hopefully we can hope at least that there will be some common European policies in this regard, but we're still not there yet. So I didn't want to go too long, but I hope that it was enough to raise the questions and to give a little bit of a background for a country that is very small from here. In the European context, we're mid-sized countries, so let me just make sure that it's a different perspective. But a country that is really in the midst of these very historic movements and in the midst of a lot of big economic changes that we need in the rest of the European Union as well. And I think in some ways also a country that is facing similar challenges and similar questions as many are raising here in the United States. So I think we have a lot in common to discuss. And since we are very strong believers and supporters of this transatlantic community and of cooperation between the European Union countries and the United States, we very much want to focus on these international challenges in this transatlantic framework in which we can understand each other better and better all the time, which is what I learned through my own Fulbright experience. It's not just learning a language that is important, it's learning the context or the sort of the social and political background of each other's discourse that is really needed for a good and solid international relations cooperation. So with this, the floor is open to your questions.
Let me just say that, first of all, thank you so much. I didn't realize William Shatner was Hungarian. I'm just kidding. But we are recording this for Nova TV, and we are going to air it next month. So if you have a question, please just raise your hand, and someone will come and bring a mic to you. Even though we might be able to hear you, we need you to speak in the mic with your questions. So just raise your hand, and there's somebody on either side who'll be able to come and get a question for you. There's one back there.
I'm one of the students for Frank Ferrara, and
Wonderful.
I was curious when you were talking about all these inventions and everything that all you Hungarians have made. I'm just curious. You were saying that all the ingenuity came from your government trying to push it through. Do you think it was also through education system and everything like that?
Yeah, I very much believe that this is a very important element of the future generations, how you prepare for the future decades in your country. And we have a very strong educational system, which we inherited for centuries back, in which the focus on sciences, mathematics, technology, and all these issues have always been in the forefront. Of course, we had a difficult period in the Cold War, but many of the vestiges are still there. And so when we started to reshape our educational system or go back to the old roots, this is the focus. So yes, with ups and downs, there is no perfect system, and we have major challenges in terms of how to continue to focus on this, but at least the effort that we need to focus on education is very clear. And I very much believe that this is a foundation that is very important.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Yep.
So earlier in your presentation, you talked about the importance of bilateral ties between the U.S. and Hungary. And right now, today, we see that the transatlantic partnership, the fair trade agreement between the U.S. and the EU, is kind of up in the air with a new U.S. president who's advocating for the renegotiation of fair trade agreements, and also protests within the EU protesting the regulations regarding the TAP. I was wondering, what are the views within Hungary regarding the TAP, and what does the Hungarian government see for the future of bilateral ties between Hungary and the U.S.?
It is a very important element, I believe, of the transatlantic cooperation to focus more on trade, because we do have very strong figures that show that the bilateral investment into each other's countries is a lot more significant than any other investment which either the European Union countries or the US has in other parts of the world. So you can find statistics that show that U.S. investments in Ireland are larger than those ones in China, for instance. But I think, obviously, the global challenges are there on the horizon. We'll have to focus on that. But we have a strong and very healthy business relationship. In addition to this, we have a very strong strategic cooperation, which we have to focus on. We have a saying, that what is the real proof of, how countries see each other. One is, who you fight with together, because that is, you're sending your own people to a common fight, and you're willing to sacrifice for a common cause your own national, and where you put your money into. And in both of these instances, I think we are, on the transatlantic level, a very strong community. So we have to continue to focus on this. And I think, although this seems to be more up in the air now. There is a refocus on understanding the importance of this. It is partly because we were not understanding this transatlantic TTIP, the transatlantic business cooperation, in its real sense. It was seen more as a technical agreement. It is not just a technical business agreement. It's a strategically important cooperation. And that is probably, I think, one of the reasons why we haven't gotten to the point of signing it. Because we were always just seeing it in a very sort of practical way. I think we have a lot more in common, and I very much hope that these discussions are acting as a refresher, as a kind of a putting it into the limelight again. And I think I very much hope that this is going to come back, maybe in a different name, maybe in a different format, but I hope in a much deeper understanding and appreciation of the importance of it. Yep.
So since the migration crisis is such a big problem, has the crime rate increased in Hungary, or how has it been affected?
Well, since we have been very serious about the registration of everyone coming into the country, what we have seen is that we were trying to help everyone to sort of follow their own desires. The majority of these people wanted to go to Germany because Germany was offering the biggest financial subsidies and the biggest support for the migrants. That was a real pull factor for the majority of these people coming through Hungary into going into Germany. We have seen some difficult scenes, so we have learned from the beginning that we have to focus on that very much. So, for instance, massive numbers of people were just walking on the highways when cars were driving really fast. I mean, it's super dangerous, obviously. So then we had to have police cars accompanying these waves of migrants on the highway, making sure that the cars don't hurt them. We have seen other crimes appearing along the Hungarian-Serbian border, for instance. Human trafficking has become huge business. I mean, incredible. It's an interesting development of the past 2 years that drug trafficking decreased between Hungary and Serbia significantly, and human trafficking is big. I mean, it is massive revenues and that's a very important pull factor. These human trafficker organizations are going to a number of these countries and saying, we can help you in this, we can help you in that, you just give us $10,000 here, $10,000 there. And I think it's a horrible, and ends up in a very difficult situation for many of these families. And the Hungarian legal system, for instance, was not ready to tackle human trafficking because it had never been a problem in Hungary before. So we had to change the legal setup so that human trafficking becomes first, a crime, that it becomes punishable, that it becomes serious, so that the authorities can act on this. What we have done is try to protect the physical safety of these people. We provided centers where we provided medical treatment, food, shelter, for the people coming through Hungary. We even set up in these centers Arabic language schools for children because we thought that they were going to stay in Hungary for longer. Nobody wanted to stay, so they were just all wanting to go through Hungary and get to Germany. Which you can't stop, of course, because as soon as you stop those people, then you are accused of imprisoning them, which is ridiculous. It's that's the very opposite. What we have not allowed and insisted on very strongly was that children who were unaccompanied by adults, that they will not be able to go forward. So we have now children's centers, because a lot of children of 10, 12 years old were just walking on their own. I mean, incredible. And of course they fall prey to the human traffickers. So of course it's a real danger. So what we have done is we stopped the children, the unaccompanied children. We wouldn't let them go anywhere. We have set up these schools, boarding schools, and they live there, and we try to find their families for them. But in terms of and there have been some increases in the crime rates, but it's marginal because we try to really make it an orderly and very much sort of a secured way for the transit of these people. This is not something that you would want to see, obviously, because the number of, in population ratio, we had 391,000 people coming through Hungary or going through Hungary in 2015. If you compare it in population ratio to the United States, these people, like I said, had no passports. They were all just wanting to cross through Hungary. If that happened in the same population ratio to the United States, it would mean 12 million illegal entrants within a year. That's what the authorities had to handle. So that's something that is really massive pressure. But the security problems came afterwards because as a result of the registration, for instance, we learned and we could prove that you remember the Paris bombing terrorist attacks of last year in the capital of France. 2 of the Paris bombers were coming through Hungary, because we have registered them, so we know that they were coming through Hungary, getting into Paris. We know that one of the terrorist leaders in Paris was going back and forth between Hungary and France several times to recruit people from among the migrants, because they were frustrated, young people, full potential, but very, disadvantaged, and that we're in a very difficult situation. So they were recruiting from among the migrants to become terrorists. 2 of the Brussels bombers and the Brussels terrorist attacks of last year were also coming through Hungary. So we have, I think, a serious European security problem at the same time as a massive, long-term strategic challenge. But it's not focused on Hungary. We claim, or we see that even after all this wave, that really went through Hungary, and we have one of the biggest Jewish districts, for instance, in Budapest, about a 5-minute walk from the railway station where they were gathering together. There were no incidents. And even today, anyone can go into the synagogues. There is no metal detector. The Jewish community can feel safe. They are supported and safe. So we don't have those incidents in Hungary, but we know of the consequences of these this massive wave into the security of other parts of Europe. Sure.
So I'd like to thank you for your time. You've been very gracious with it. And since what part of this, what I like to look at and focus on former command economies and their transition to privatization, I wonder if you would address Hungary's view of ascension into the EU, applications for ascension into the EU, like from Serbia and other countries that have economies that are not great and might be troublesome more than helpful for the EU.
Absolutely, and I think it's a very important element of our current day developments and of our situation, because it has been right after 1990, or with the first sort of big issues of sovereignty and independence and democracy in Hungary, to decide, that we did want to join the North Atlantic Treaty Organization and the European Union. And both of these organizations have proven to be really strong pillars and frameworks for our countries. So although we can see a lot of the internal problems of the European Union, a lot of the efforts are lost in non-sort of essential elements of cooperation. We can see the essential elements of the cooperation as well. And when we focus on trying to better the European Union, it seems like it's a critical approach to the European Union. It's really for the betterment of the cooperation. So what we have seen in this European context is that there is so much of a common sense for these European Union countries to stick together and to work together. And there's so much of a benefit for this that we do want to keep it as important as it is and make it better, more functional, less, not just bureaucratic, because one of the big problems is, that Brussels, as a kind of a headquarters of Europe, has become, the original idea of the European Union was that it's a composition of nation states. There is no contradiction between us being Hungarians and Europeans, obviously. It's the same culture. We have the same thing, of course, but there is no sort of Europeanness without a national identity behind it. And it's not contradictory. And some of the thinking in Brussels feels that there is a contradiction. And so I think we have to sort this out. That nation states, we feel like when you have in sports, a good football team. What is the better solution for your team? If you have 12 weak players, or if you have 12 strong players in the team? That's how we feel about the nation states. The stronger we are as nation states, the more we can contribute to a common European agenda, and we believe it's a stronger team. Some in Brussels, when they criticize and say everything that is about national background is nationalism, which is a big difference, they sort of send the message that the weaker the member states, the better. We don't believe in that. I think our experience is the opposite. We can cooperate better if all the member states are stronger, which is our intention. But that is not at the detriment of the European Union. Quite the opposite is to make it stronger, make it more efficient, make it more focused, more supporting all the countries that are inside.
You say that you don't want weaker states in the European Union. With that in mind, what is the Hungarian, thought process behind the economic crisis in Greece? I believe their debt is double their national GDP right now, and Germany has basically said that they don't plan on bailing them out for a second or third time, I believe. What is the Hungarian approach to that, considering they'd be looked at as a weak state within the European Union right now?
What we have seen in the case of Greece, of course, it's a very complex story in which there are a lot of factors that contributed to this very deep economic crisis. What we have tried to do is since Hungary was predicted to be was in a very similar situation, what we have tried to focus on is to save our own and solve our own challenges, our own economy's challenges, in a way that it becomes, that Hungary becomes a strong country and an economically, viable and healthy country, which we managed to do. Of course, we have a lot of ideas and suggestions of how the European Union could help Greece and go forward. It's very difficult, it's very complex, but I very much believe that this will never go without taking some very hard measures. And if you have a leadership that is ready to go for the hard measures, is ready to convince the population that we have to go through, you will be okay, you will be much better off afterwards, then you can lead a country through a hard few years, but into an economic stability and healthy development and growth. If you don't have that leadership, or if the political structures are weak, or if the political structures are unable to convince the population that we have to take these tough measures, then there's no way any external aid can help it. So it has to come from within. And that's why I think we're seeing problems in Greece, which is partly exterior conditions. Part of them are interior conditions that are needed. But if you don't, first you have to have the interior commitment and leadership for this. That is unavoidable.
So
One more?
One more? Can you do one more?
Yes,
Okay.
just, sorry, yeah.
Could you speak a little bit about Hungary's relationship, political and economic, with Russia?
Yes, it's a great question, something that is looming there. And I was doing this, a lot of work on energy security. I had a map in my office, which was not this map, but it was the huge, all the former Soviet Union with all the pipelines. And what you could, colored big pipelines. So we will know where we get the energy from, oil and gas. What you could see is that from the Soviet Union, there were two major sort of east-west pipelines supplying Central Europe. Of course, at that time, the Soviet satellite countries. And there was no north-south interconnectivity, because the idea of the Soviet Union was that they target their countries parallelly, and then they can separate and control us in a lot more efficient way, of course. So our efforts were to try to establish this north-south interconnectivity, on the basis of which we believed we could create a competition and a market type of infrastructure for the natural gas especially, but for the energy supplies of our countries, and so create a very stable and pragmatic relationship with Russia. Because as long as the only way for us to have natural gas, which is a strong component of the energy mix, is from Russia, then you're always dependent. So I kept saying, since I was brought up on Radio Free Europe and dealt a lot with energy, that the Warsaw Pact, as the military element of the Soviet Union, collapsed within half a year. The Comecon, the economic element of the Soviet oppression of Central Europe, disappeared within a week. That was totally non-viable. But the energy supply systems, really strategic. They kept on for 26 years now after the end of the Cold War, and we still continue to get the natural gas supplies exclusively from Russia. So we tried to diversify, and our efforts were to create this regional market, so that if the Poles build an LNG terminal to get liquefied natural gas into the Central European region, in the north it's called Świnoujście, then we can have their molecules down into Hungary as well, so we can have a gas-to-gas competition between Russian gas and LNG or other non-Russian gas molecules. We were also very much believing in Croatia. We're landlocked. It's kind of difficult to get hooked on the international system if you are landlocked. So you have to have partners in this. You have to have access to sea, which means partnership. So which is why we tried with the Poles and then with Croatia to establish a Hungarian-Croatian interconnector and access to the world markets through Croatia, so we can have non-Russian gas into the system. I have to tell you, I keep telling my colleagues as well, but that I was very much involved in these energy diversification projects. We had 4 major project plans. I was part of all 4, and failure, nothing happened. So if you take a look at my CV from this perspective, nobody's ever going to hire me. It's like nothing happened. Unfortunately for the region as well, because what is the end result is that we continue to have those sort of Russian or Soviet-designed pipelines. And although Poland has now an LNG terminal, which is good for Poland, the quantities are too small for the rest of the Central European countries. Lithuania similarly developed their own LNG terminal. I mean, they have access to sea. That's super easy. If we had sea, we would be solved. Croatia still doesn't have one, and we're still not having this regional north-south interconnectivity, which means that we continue to have our natural gas supplies, which means that every year there is a 3-4 months long winter. You can predict that. I mean, definitely. Every December to March, that's going to be there, or November to February. It's going to be there. So we had to develop a very pragmatic relationship with Russia. We tried to make it as depoliticized as possible, as much focused on energy cooperation as possible, and make it as pragmatic as possible so that the pressure that would otherwise come from an economic or energy relationship will not be brought into the political level. Which is, I think, a good result is that we used to have 20 years long contracts. That's what Russia always wanted. One was even signed after the end of the Cold War, 1995, by the then socialist government of Hungary, by the way, who were the successors of the communist government before 1990. But they signed a 20-year-long contract, which expired in 2015. Now, that's when Vladimir Putin came to Budapest. And that, I think, was a major strategic point in which we managed not only, they were looking for another 20-year-long contract, and we managed to shift our relations in a way that it's not only that we didn't have to sign a 20-year-long contract, but now we have a yearly contract with Russia on natural gas imports. So I think in reality, we have changed, decreased the political elements of the natural gas trade deals that we have had before, and I think it is really a very important element. Of course, we have had meets Vladimir Putin is immediately presented in the media as a Russia-friendly person. I think it's a lot simpler than that. As long as we don't have any other access to get natural gas into the system, we will continue to be in a contractual relationship with Russia because our economy needs it. But we managed to decrease, for instance, the part of natural gas, since we didn't have, non-Russian gas in the region. We managed to decrease, for instance, the natural gas consumption of Hungary, to decrease the element of import pressure from the system, from our own economic system. So, for instance, until 2010, we were consuming 13 billion cubic meter per natural gas per year. By 2013, we went down to 10, and now, today, past year, we're down to 8.5. Which is a significant decrease. All of these are increasing our sovereignty and increasing our sort of pragmatic relations. So you think, when you're a landlocked country and you don't have, much of a natural resources, your secret weapon in energy is energy efficiency. And that's what we have to do through innovation and through a lot of changes and everything. So that's what we have been trying to do, and literally has had a good result. But yes, we don't see that the European energy system will be workable without Russian natural gas supplies. It's not just Central Europe, but Germany in particular that has a lot of it. And what you can see is that it's the German attention, which is our support for keeping that up, which is determining for Europe. What we have tried to do in the Central European region is to depoliticize it and make it as pragmatic as possible. Even despite the Crimean War, which really hurt us all. Of course, the Hungarian economies were exporting to the Russian markets. It's not an easy situation. We do have a very significant loss of export markets as a result of the sanctions against Crimea, but we always signed the sanctions. We always contributed to it. We just said that the burden sharing is not equal, so if we are hurt more than other countries who are also part of the sanction system, then maybe there should be a compensation system for us so that we can be in this together. We're not there yet, but this is, this sort of the discussion that we're having. But we have always supported all the sanctions at the detriment of our own businesses, profitability, and at the extra cost of the Hungarian businesses who were who are hurt because of the sanctions, as opposed to French or Spanish or whatever companies, that are not hurt to that extent. But I think it's our responsibility as political leaders to call the attention to the need for a fairer burden sharing or for other solutions for countries that are particularly hurt. And I think what we have is a very pragmatic relationship with Russia, which is inevitable when you have a prime minister who was the first one in 1989 and 1990 at the first few elections, stood up and said, that we want the Soviet troops out of Hungary, which is Orban. So the best you can get is a good pragmatic relationship, which is, I think it's in our strategic interest. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you.
Well, thank you. Wow.
So I want to say thank you so much, and we were able to find a United States flag and a Virginia flag. We did not have a Hungarian flag, but we do have a gift, and so
That's the Hungarian
we
flag.
have wrapped it in the Hungarian flag. It's just a small token, but we just want to say thank you so much for taking your time to come and talk to us and to educate us on Hungary and the many things that are going on there and the many things that are just new to us and things that we didn't know about that country. We're very pleased that you could come, and we appreciate it.
Thank you so
thank
much.
You very
It's
much.
very kind. Well, I have to say, I forgot one thing. Barbara, Dean Hopkins, if I may, thank you so much for this wonderful, wonderful, kind gesture. She asked me to tell you what it feels like to be an ambassador here. It feels great, because I have to tell you, it's a real honor. I'm the first woman ambassador from Hungary who is posted in Washington, D.C., so I'm very honored, and thank you very much. And of course, wherever you go and you can represent your country is a real honor. It gives you a very special feel. I had been working in the Prime Minister's office before. This is a part of the government everywhere, like the National Security Council, I guess, in many ways here, where you see the entire administration, because all the conflicts come in, from economic side to the education, to healthcare, to environmental, whatever concern comes up, it's in the Prime Minister's office. But it's a wonderful feel, and it's very, very elevating, and it's really a gift of life to be able to represent that towards another country and create stronger relationships and a better understanding. So I believe that is a wonderful mission, and I'm very honored to be here, and I thank you so much for this very, very kind attention towards a country that is small from here, middle-sized in Europe, but is in the midst of all these geostrategic developments in Europe. So thank you very much for this wonderful invitation.